In the space of a single morning, 3 ships in the Strait of Hormuz caught fire one after another in 3 different spots along the same stretch of water. The first was a tanker called the Al-Rekayat, hit by an unidentified projectile 8 miles off the coast of Oman, flames breaking out along its port side almost instantly. The second was struck while it was actually leaving the strait, 16 miles off the UAE coast, hit by another unidentified projectile as it tried to make its way clear of the danger zone. The third was hit by a drone. No warning shots fired first. No claim of responsibility issued in advance. No single group stepping forward to say this was them. Just 3 separate fires in 3 separate locations, all reported to maritime authorities within hours of each other on a single Tuesday morning that turned out to be the worst single day for attacks on that waterway since the end of April. And by that evening, the United States Central Command posted a message that made it very clear this wasn't going to end with 3 burning ships and a strongly worded statement from a shipping authority. CENTCOM said American forces had begun launching what they called powerful strikes against targets inside Iran, specifically to impose heavy costs, in their words, for attacking commercial shipping crewed by innocent civilians in an international waterway. That phrase, crewed by innocent civilians, wasn't accidental. It was the U.S. drawing a clear moral line between military targets and the ordinary sailors caught in the middle of a war they have no part in. Within hours, U.S. officials confirmed exactly what was being hit, speaking to reporters on condition of anonymity because the operation was still actively underway. Air defense systems along the Iranian coastline, coastal surveillance networks, the radar and tracking systems Iran uses to identify ships moving through the strait in the first place, ground-to-air missile batteries, launch sites built specifically for anti-ship cruise missiles and drones, the exact category of weapon used against those 3 tankers that same morning, and Iranian port facilities themselves, the physical infrastructure used to stage and launch these kinds of operations. One official said plainly that the strikes were expected to continue for hours, not minutes. This wasn't a single retaliatory missile fired to make a symbolic point, and then a return to quiet. This was a coordinated multi-target campaign aimed at dismantling the exact infrastructure Iran had just used to shut down 1/5 of the world's oil traffic for a single morning. To put those targets in perspective, air defense systems and coastal surveillance networks aren't just pieces of hardware sitting on a map. They're the eyes and the shield of an entire coastline. Taking those out doesn't just punish Iran for what happened that morning. It strips away the ability to see American ships coming and the ability to stop the next wave of strikes from getting through cleanly. Military analysts who study this kind of targeting pattern describe it as a deliberate attempt to degrade what's sometimes called an anti-access area denial network, the layered system of radar, missiles, and coastal defenses that a smaller military uses to make a much larger navy think twice about sailing too close. Hitting all of it at once rather than picking off targets one at a time over separate operations is the kind of decision that gets made when commanders want the effect to be felt immediately, not gradually. Within that same news cycle, almost quietly by comparison, the U.S. Treasury made a separate move that mattered just as much as anything fired from a jet or a ship. It revoked the license that had authorized Iran to legally export its own oil, an authorization that had only existed in the first place because of the ceasefire deal signed weeks earlier. A U.S. official told reporters plainly that Iran's actions in the strait were unacceptable and needed to be met with consequences. Think about what that actually means. In the space of about 12 hours, Iran didn't just lose military hardware along its coastline. It lost the legal pathway to sell the one resource its entire economy is built around. Oil is not a side issue for Iran. It is close to the entire foundation of the state's ability to fund itself. And with a single administrative action in Washington, that pathway was cut off again, on the same day American jets and ships were hitting targets on Iranian soil. The financial ripple was almost immediate. Brent crude futures jumped nearly 2% within hours of the attacks becoming public, rising close to $2 a barrel. That might sound like a small number, but multiply that across the tens of millions of barrels moving through global markets every single day, and you start to understand why traders, insurers, and governments thousands of miles away from the Persian Gulf were watching this unfold in real time. War risk insurance premiums on tankers, which had already spiked earlier in this conflict, were expected to climb again, adding hundreds of thousands of dollars to the cost of a single voyage through waters that a growing number of shipping companies were already starting to avoid entirely. To understand how 3 burning tankers turned into coordinated strikes inside Iranian territory within the space of a single day, you have to go back to where this specific cycle started, because none of this is happening for the first time. This is not a new pattern, it's a repeating one, and understanding the repetition is the key to understanding why nobody, not analysts, not diplomats, not the militaries involved, believes this ends cleanly anytime soon. Back on February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated assault deep inside Iran, hitting military installations, nuclear facilities, and senior leadership. killing the country's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, in the opening hours of that operation. Iran's answer came almost immediately. It shut the Strait of Hormuz completely, turning off a fifth of the entire world's oil supply and a comparable share of its liquefied natural gas overnight, an economic shockwave that reached gas stations and shipping companies on the other side of the planet within days. For weeks after that, the two countries fought an open, direct war. Neither of them had fought with each other at this scale in decades. Bunker-buster bombs against underground missile silos, naval blockades, assassinated commanders, fast attack boats hunted down by American gunships. It's worth pausing on just how unusual that opening strike was in the first place. Assassinating a sitting head of state, especially one holding the title of supreme leader in a country where that role carries both political and religious authority, is the kind of action that doesn't have many recent precedents. It wasn't just a military blow. It was designed to decapitate the entire chain of command in a single stroke. And it reshaped the leadership structure of an entire nation overnight, in ways that are still being felt in the streets of Qom this very week. By mid-June, both sides were exhausted, and both economies were under enormous strain. Iran was reportedly losing close to $5 billion in oil revenue from the blockade alone. And so, remarkably, they actually reached a deal. Trump and Iran's president, Masoud Pezeshkian, signed a memorandum of understanding meant to end the fighting for good in a ceremony hosted, of all places, at a dinner in Versailles. The naval blockade lifted. Oil started moving through the strait again. Shipping companies that had been avoiding the region for months cautiously started sending vessels back through. For a moment, briefly, it genuinely looked like a war that started with the killing of a supreme leader might actually end with a signature at a dinner table on the other side of the world. It didn't hold, not fully, and it never really had a chance to. Within days of that agreement being signed, Israel continued conducting strikes in southern Lebanon, and Iran responded by closing the strait again, calling it a direct violation of the ceasefire terms, a claim the United States flatly denied, insisting Israel's actions in Lebanon had nothing to do with the terms Iran had agreed to regarding the strait. Through the back half of June, the pattern kept repeating itself in smaller, almost rhythmic doses. A tanker gets hit somewhere along the waterway. The United States responds with a strike somewhere inside Iran. Both governments accuse the other side of breaking the deal in nearly identical language each time. And then, just 11 days before this latest and largest round of attacks, the U.S. Navy quietly did something with real strategic significance. It announced a widened shipping route through the strait near the Omani coastline, specifically engineered to let more vessel traffic move through without needing anyone's permission from Tehran at all. It was, by design and by intent, a direct challenge to the idea that Iran controls this waterway in any meaningful sense. And now, less than 2 weeks after that announcement, 3 tankers were burning in a single morning, and American strikes were underway on Iranian soil in response. What makes this round different from the smaller skirmishes that had been happening through most of June is the sheer density and coordination of it. 3 ships hit within a matter of hours is not the same signature as a single drone strike on a single vessel, spaced weeks apart from the last one. Whoever ordered those 3 attacks either wanted to send an unmistakable, impossible-to-ignore message, or wanted to inflict enough simultaneous damage across the waterway that no single incident could be written off or explained away as an isolated accident, a rogue actor, or a misunderstanding. And the American response matched that scale and that intent almost exactly, hitting not one target but an entire category of Iranian military infrastructure in one coordinated operation, air defenses, surveillance networks, missile launch sites, and port facilities, all struck within the same extended window, described by officials as lasting hours rather than minutes. There's a timing detail buried in all of this that's easy to scroll past, but says something important about how this moment was actually handled at the very highest level of American government. These strikes were ordered and carried out while President Trump was physically in Turkey, attending a NATO summit alongside allied heads of state from across Europe and beyond. The decision to launch a multi-target, multi-hour military operation inside Iranian territory wasn't made from behind a quiet desk in Washington during an uneventful week. It was made in the middle of one of the year's most significant international diplomatic gatherings, with allied leaders in the room and the world's attention already on that summit for entirely different reasons. That timing tells you something. It tells you the administration did not see this as something that could wait for a more convenient moment back home. The response came fast, and it came while the president himself was standing on a stage built for an entirely different set of headlines. And in the background of all of this, an entirely different, almost surreal scene has been playing out inside Iran itself, running in parallel with the strikes and the burning tankers. This same week, hundreds of thousands of mourners have been walking toward the Jamkaran Mosque near the city of Qom, following the funeral procession for Ali Khamenei, whose body was flown there for burial rites months after he was killed in the war's opening strikes. It's a site with deep, almost mystical significance in Shia tradition, believed by many to be connected to a hidden imam who vanished centuries ago and is prophesied to one day return to bring justice to the world. Iranian state television broadcast the procession live across the country, presenting an image of overwhelming national unity and grief, hundreds of thousands of people moving as one toward a mosque tied to a centuries-old prophecy, even as the country's military infrastructure was actively being struck by American forces the very same week. Two completely different realities, running side by side, both happening because of the exact same war. A funeral drawing enormous crowds into the streets in collective mourning, and airstrikes hitting missile sites and ports along the coast, just hours away by road from where those crowds were gathered. So where does this actually leave things right now? And it's worth sitting with the uncertainty here instead of rushing past it toward a tidy conclusion, because there isn't one yet. Shipping data had shown traffic through the strait picking up significantly since the ceasefire was first signed, though still nowhere near pre-war levels, with over 100 vessels reported crossing through various routes in just the weekend before this latest round of violence. The fear now among shipping companies, insurers, and the governments that depend on this waterway is that a single day like this one, 3 tankers hit within hours of each other, is enough to freeze that fragile recovery all over again, sending shipping traffic right back down to where it was during the worst weeks of the war. Diplomats had genuinely hoped that widened shipping route announced less than 2 weeks ago would ease tensions over time by giving vessels a practical path through the strait that didn't require anyone's permission from Tehran. Instead, it may have provoked exactly the kind of response it was designed to make unnecessary in the first place. Nobody outside a small circle of officials on either side, in Washington or in Tehran, can say with any real confidence right now whether this round of strikes represents the peak of this particular flare-up, or whether it's simply the latest step in a cycle that has already proven again and again since the end of February that it knows exactly how to restart itself the moment it looks like it might finally be winding down. What is certain, as of this week, is that the ceasefire that was supposed to end this war exists mostly as a piece of paper now, tested by burning ships in open water and by American strikes landing somewhere inside Iranian territory, even while an entire nation walks through the streets of calm, mourning the man whose death set this entire chain of events into motion in the first place.